adrenal disorders in children, which will cover more than 70% of pediatric endocrine disorders in children. Right. So I will talk to you about steroid hormone synthesis, adrenal failure, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, Cushing, familial glucocorticoid deficiency, pheochromocytoma, and a little bit about adrenal tumors. So as you know, adrenal gland has two major parts, cortex and the medulla. Cortex has three layers. Outermost layer is zona glomerulosa, which produces aldosterone, maintains the salt balance. Then the next layer is zona fasciculata, so to maintain sugar. Zona reticularis is the innermost part of the cortex, which produces androgens in both sexes. And the adrenal medulla produces norepinephrine. We talk about adrenal cortex. It is the place where steroid hormones and cortisol, testosterone, and estrogen.
Madam, excuse me. Madam,
Yeah.
jack එක පොඩ්ඩක් බුරුල් පොඩි අර චිරි චිරි සද්දයක් වගේ if you can just adjust it, that would be clear, madam.
Okay.
Yeah,
so the
thanks.
Adrenal hormone synthesis, that is the cortisol, is dependent on the hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal feedback. So the hypothalamus produces corticotrophin releasing hormone, which can act on the anterior pituitary. And anterior pituitary produces adrenocorticotropic hormone from pituitary, and it goes and acts on the adrenal cortex to produce. And when the cortisol is produced, it gives a feedback to pituitary as well as hypothalamus to CRH and ACTH. Then I would like to talk to you about little bit of renin-angiotensin aldosterone system, so that it is the pathology arising from the adrenal gland. As angio is produced from the liver. When the renal perfusion juxtaglomerular apparatus feels it, the decrease in renal perfusion, produces renin. Renin goes and acts on the angiotensinogen 1 to produce angiotensinogen. And the pulmonary epithelium produces angiotensin converting enzyme to angiotensin 2. This angiotensin 2 has various effects. It improves tubular sodium chloride reabsorption and potassium excretion, vasoconstriction to increase the blood pressure, pituitary gland to produce ADH, and water absorption from the collecting ducts, whereby to restore water and salt retain. Blood pressure is maintained. The effective circulatory volume increases and perfusion of the juxtaglomerular apparatus increases. And when the perfusion is reduced, renin is produced and it gets converted to angiotensinogen 2, whereby sodium potassium retention, water absorption, vasoconstriction, and maintain the. So what are the diseases associated with primary adrenal failure or Addison disease. It could be due to adrenal hypoplasia, where the adrenal cortex is not being developed properly because of genetic diseases, that is SF1 and DAX1. Thyroid biosynthetic path, the DAX1 and SF1 mutations effect reduce cholesterol to progranulin, the reduction in progranulin production from steroid hormone biosynthetic pathway. So those patients can present with deficiency as well as sex hormone deficiency. So those patients could be having gonadotrophin as
Excuse me, madam. Sorry to disturb you. I think doctors are sending messages. I think we are getting some breaks in between in your voice, madam. I'm not sure whether it's something wrong with the.
Let's try again. Is it okay
yeah.
now?
Yeah, it getting breaks in between.
Okay.
That is yeah. Now I can hear. Some
Is it
disturbance we are
okay
getting.
now?
Yeah. Just carry on, madam. If there's anything, I'll just raise my hand. This thing then.
Is it okay now?
We are getting some disturbance when you speak. It get breaks in between. I'm not sure what the issue is, madam. You have some other jacket or something, hands-free or something?
I have another one. This is a jack, I think. I'm using a jack, not the Bluetooth one.
Right. What about the bandwidth of the internet?
The background. Don't know whether it is the reason. Yeah, it is good.
Full
If you
band.
want, I can.
Then something wrong. I'm not sure what the issue is. Everybody is sending message like we have some disturbances in between. Some point it's very clear, but suddenly it get breaks. I'm not sure whether it's a connection issue, madam. Do you have the full strength of bus in the internet connection? Should be, no, madam.
Should be. Shall I join through the personal hotspot as well, so that there are two?
Yeah, whatever the strength you have, better strength, that would be better, madam.
Let me see. Oh,
Hello.
can you hear now?
Yeah, clear. Can hear what you said now.
I can hear a noise of a vehicle also.
Right. Now, can we continue, madam? मैडम की स्पीकर का कौन कर लेती है ना नहीं तो मैडम हेलो
Hello.
मैडम की स्पीकर का कौन कर लेना है
Okay now.
Can hear. Yeah.
Can you hear?
Yeah, what you just said I heard. Yes.
Can you hear now?
Yes.
Yeah, madam. Yes. Yeah.
Can you hear? Shall I go on?
Yeah, madam, I
No?
heard what you said. Yeah, heard. Madam, do you hear what we say, madam? Hello?
Hello?
Madam, do you hear what we say?
I didn't hear anything. Now what? Now
madam.
I heard it. What did you say? Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's breaking from that end also. It's breaking. Your voice is also breaking now.
Shall we continue, madam? Just see whether if any get breaks in between.
Right. Okay. So adrenal gland hypoplasia start, that could be due to genetic causes like SF1 and X1 mutation, where a boy will be born with maybe they can hear. Right. Adrenal gland cortex properly formed. Because of that, they cannot produce cortisol, aldosterone, as well as sex hormones. So they will be born as undervirilized females. But there are these genotype, phenotype changes where sometimes these patients may be born with normal genitalia. Later on, they can have only gonadotrophin deficiency, only cortisol deficiency, or both. But those things can appear over time, may not appear during the neonatal period. So image syndrome is again a condition associated with adrenal hypoplasia, and ACTH receptor defects where there is familial glucocorticoid deficiency. It's only the glucocorticoid axis is defective. Other one is triple A syndrome, which is associated Addison, alexithymia, achalasia cardia, and now they call it 4A's autonomic dysfunction. So not triple A is now called 4A. And there are these conditions associated with adrenal destruction. It could be due to autoimmune conditions like autoimmune polyendocrinopathy. It could be due to adrenoleukodystrophy, infectious causes like tuberculosis. It could be a hemorrhage to the adrenal gland or a metastatic condition associated with malignancy, drugs like ketoconazole, or it could be a metabolic disorder where certain metabolites are deposited in the adrenal cortex, making the adrenal gland non-functioning properly, like amyloidosis, Wolman, and Zellweger are the conditions associated with this adrenal cortical due to accumulation of metabolic. Other thing is impaired steroidogenesis, where the cholesterol biosynthesis is disassociated with Sitt-Lemli-Opitz syndrome or beta lipoproteinemia, that is associated with cholesterol biosynthesis defect, because cholesterol is the precursor for steroid hormone biosynthesis. When the cholesterol is not there, they cannot produce steroids in the adrenal, or steroid biosynthetic defects, as I showed you earlier in the steroid biosynthetic pathway, which are associated with either congenital adrenal hyperplasia, P450 oxidoreductase deficiency, star protein mutation, or mitochondrial DNA deletion. So all these things are associated with steroid biosynthetic defect. So how do they manifest? They can have chronic manifestations and acute manifestations with an acute insult. Febrile illness can result in acute adrenal insufficiency, but if there is no acute insult to the body, they will have features of chronic adrenal. Chronic features are weakness, fatigue, anorexia, weight loss, hypotension, or hyperpigmentation. Why do they get hyperpigmentation? When the adrenal gland is destroyed and adrenal gland is not producing cortisol, Due to feedback mechanisms, more ACTH is produced and patient becomes hyperpigmented. Acute adrenal insufficiency, they develop hypotension, shock, apathy, confusion, again anorexia, vomiting, dehydration, abdominal pain, hypothermia. Sorry about the spellings, it's hypothermia. Neonates can present with, depending on with or without ambiguous genitalia, pigmentation, and salt losing crisis. I'm hearing a lot of disturbances, noises.
Doctor, if your mic is
Is it clear?
unmuted,
Can
kindly
somebody
please.
send me a text?
Yeah,
I think it's from the other people around.
yeah. I please
Joined ones.
mute your mic
Please
if
mute
somebody.
all your. So, when you want to investigate for adrenal insufficiency, random cortisol level is of value only during a stressful situation. Otherwise, random cortisol will not tell us exactly whether there is any cortisol deficiency. However, for less than 3 micrograms per deciliter, almost makes the diagnosis highly unlikely. So in a situation when the cortisol level is between 3 to 15, we will have to do synactin stimulation test with 250 micrograms of synactin or 125 micrograms depending on the age of the child. How would you treat a patient with adrenal crisis? If you are uncertain of the diagnosis, but still if you have a suspicion of adrenal crisis, it's always better to treat after taking blood sample. So if you take a blood sample at this time for cortisol, and if it is low, it is almost diagnostic of cortisol deficiency. So initially you will have dextrose 5 ml per kg if the patient is hypoglycemic, followed by infusion always. If you give a dextrose bolus, you always have to follow with the dextrose and IV hydrocortisone 100 milligrams per meter square bolus, and then 100 milligrams per meter square per day in 4 divided doses. There are different dosing regimes depending on the age. This is the easier formula that you could remember. But if you can't remember the dose, give whatever the dose that comes to your mind, because that will save the life of the patient. There is no overdose of hydrocortisone when after a bolus. You have to monitor the ECG to look for hyperkalemia, treat hyperkalemia if it is there. You can use calcium gluconate. If the calcium potassium level is very high, you can use nebulization. You can use insulin dextrose, anything to reduce the high potassium level if it is very high. But most of the time, patients with adrenal insufficiency do not have that degree of hyperkalemia. So this could be managed only with nebulizations or with hydration. Always later, once you stabilize the patient, can add fludrocortisone when the potassium, if the potassium low and if the underlying diagnosis is pituitary failure, where the cortisol is not being produced due to a central defect, you don't have to give fludrocortisone because rest of the adrenal gland is not being influenced by the ACTH. So ACTH is responsible for cortisol. When the pituitary gland is not there, it's only cortisol which is not being produced. Other hormones are being produced, because if the adrenal crisis is due to a pituitary problem, you don't have to give fludrocortisone. How do you do the simulation test? The standard dose is excellent for excluding primary adrenal insufficiency. But mild, partial or recent onset PTH or hypothalamic CRH deficiency may have a normal response to standard test. So in that situation, you will have to use low dose corticosteroid test to detect mild adrenal insufficiency. That is 1 micrograms of synacthen. It should not be done in places where the training has not been done to do this test because it will give erroneous results. It has to be done in a place where low dose corticotrophin stimulation test has been, and only by the people who know how to dilute this vial, because there are 250 micrograms in one vial and you have to get only 1 microgram. Because of that, so many errors can take place. It's better not to do it unless you are well trained to do a low dose corticotrophin stimulation test. The insulin tolerance test will tell you whether there is a secondary adrenal insufficiency that is associated with hypopituitarism. So, what are the other disorders in children? Sorry. Right. If you have facilities to do ACTH, that will differentiate from primary from the secondary adrenal failure. If it is secondary adrenal failure, ACTH is undetectable. If it is a primary adrenal failure, ACTH is. If you have facilities, you can do renin and aldosterone, which will tell you whether it is a steroid biosynthetic pathway defect, like in congenital adrenal hyperplasia, where the renin level is high with low aldosterone. Ultrasound scan will show you whether there is any adrenal hemorrhage, adrenal calcification, or adrenal tumor. MRI scan of the brain will show you whether there is a pituitary hyperplasia associated with adrenal insufficiency, and also, more importantly, molecular genetic studies. Having said that, molecular genetic studies will tell us what the etiology or molecular basis of the disease, but the treatment is whatever the molecular test, the treatment is same, your hydrocortisone and fludrocortisone, and salt supplement for congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Let's discuss a little bit about autoimmune polyglandular syndrome. Type 1, there are major manifestations as well as mucocutaneous candidiasis, autoimmune hypoparathyroidism, autoimmune adrenal failure are the major manifestations. Minor manifestations are other associated autoimmune disorders, maybe diabetes, maybe hypothyroidism, hypergonadotrophic hypopolythiasis, pernicious anemia, chronic active hepatitis, vitiligo, alopecia, nail dystrophy, dental hypoplasia, keratoconus, hyposplenism. So, if you get a who is suspected to have autoimmune polyglandular syndrome or episode, you will look for all the other manifestations, certain conditions that needs treatment associated with autoimmune adrenal insufficiency. Type 2, primary adrenocortical insufficiency with either autoimmune thyroid disease or type 1 diabetes. Only 10% have the complete. So, if a person has Addison disease and thyroid disease, you call it Schmidt syndrome. Addison type 1 diabetes, you call it Carpenter syndrome. What you have to understand is in a patient with type 1 diabetes continues to get hypoglycemic episodes unexplained, you will have to look for Addison disease. Autoimmune polyglandular type 3 is associated with autoimmune thyroid disease and other autoimmune diseases other than Addison disease. Congenital adrenal hyperplasias also associated with cortisol deficiency. 21 hydroxylase deficiency is the commonest. 90 to 95% of the cases are 21 hydroxylase deficiency with an incidence of 1 in 1000. 11 beta hydroxylase deficiency, the cortisol is deficient. However, they will have hypokalemia rather than hyperkalemia because deoxycorticosteroid which can act on the mineralocorticoid receptors. 7 alpha, same. 3 beta hydroxysteroid deficiency, again they can present with cortisol deficiency and genitalia in both sexes. P450 oxidoreductase is a combined form of just like 17 alpha and 21 hydroxylase. Their incidence is unclear. There are, as I told you, two inborn errors in steroid. Cholesterol transporter, because cholesterol has to go through the mitochondrial membrane and enter to produce pregnenolone. If this star protein is defective, cholesterol cannot. And the cytochrome P450 enzyme, CYP11A1, there for the cholesterol to get converted to pregnenolone. If this does not take place, cortisol production does not take. So, two inborn errors in steroidogenesis are associated with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, that is star protein defect and CYP11A1 defect. When you want to diagnose CH, you will have to understand and remember this pathway. When the P450 oxidoreductase is defective, all of these path axes are defective. So they don't produce androstenedione, not produce testosterone. The boy will look like a female. Females will not have ambiguity. They will not produce aldosterone, they will not produce. If the defect is here, they will have high pregnenolone to progesterone ratio. And 17-hydroxypregnenolone will be higher than 17-hydroxyprogesterone. And DHEAS levels will be high in 3-BCH. This pathway is defective. Majority of the pregnenolone gets diverted through this pathway, so they will produce more DHEA, and DHEA levels are high. And they will have defective aldosterone and cortisol production. If 21-hydroxylase is deficient, their biomarker is high 17-hydroxyprogesterone, low cortisol, low aldosterone. Likewise, if you do the metabolites, the metabolite accumulated just prior to this enzyme defect will be high. So with that, you will be able to diagnose where the defect is exactly. Androstenedione level again will be high in 21-hydroxylase deficiency patients because more 17-hydroxyprogesterone is being produced. That will get converted to androstenedione, and androstenedione will get converted to testosterone. So that is why patients with 21-hydroxylase deficiency will become virilized. The place of urinary 17-ketosteroids, it measures the metabolites of DHEA and DHEAS, and contribution is from androstenedione. So this will show, however, it will not show testosterone and dihydrotestosterone metabolic products. The urinary 17-ketosteroids can get affected with penicillin, spironolactone, nalidixic acid. So that will increase the 17-ketosteroid levels. We do not do this routinely, not even in other, unless they want to find out where exactly the defect is. Especially for aldosterone synthase deficiency, they do the urinary steroid profiles. For other conditions, they don't do it. Management, replace the missing hormones, glucocorticoid to 15% and mineralocorticoid 100 to 150 micrograms per meter square per day. The dose of mineralocorticoid in infancy, early infancy is higher, and we have to give sodium chloride supplements in infancy, usually up to 6 or 12 months of life. The target is to normalize the androgens or sex hormones, which means we don't want more ACTH. We have to cut off ACTH. Because of that, we have to replace cortisol, which will prevent virilization and it optimizes the growth, development, and also it will protect against other hormones. How do you monitor a patient who is on treatment for congenital adrenal hyperplasia? There are biochemical as well as clinical. As a clinician, I would first discuss how would you clinically diagnose the adequacy of treatment. If the patient is hyperpigmented, you know that you have not given adequate amount of. If the virilization is progressive, if the child is getting hirsute, then you know your cortisol levels are not enough. If the patient feels tired early in the morning or feels vomiting, the cortisol dose is not enough. Striate, which means you are giving more than adequate amount of cortisol. You have to come down on the cortisol dose. Blood pressure. If you are not giving adequate amount of aldosterone or fludrocortisone, either your pressure will be high if you are giving more fludrocortisone. So all babies with CH should get blood pressure checked. And as a pediatrician, you should monitor height, weight, growth, velocity, and BMI. If the height is crossing entities, you know that you are not adequately treating this child. If the height is faltering, you know you are over treating this child. So that is why it is very important that you monitor height, weight, and growth velocity to find out the adequacy of treatment. And Tanner stage and testicular volume in boys. If you are not treating them adequately, more androgens will be produced and they will become virilized and the testicular volume will be low and you might feel the adrenal and you would see the phallic length disproportionate to the testicular volume. Then you know that you have not adequately treated this child with hydrocortisone. Biochemically, 17 OHP, initially we have to do at least every 3 to 6 months and titrate the cortisol dose. Androstenedione, which is not available at the moment in this country, is a very good biomarker. Renin, aldosterone, testosterone are other metabolites other hormones that you have to check to find the adequacy of your treatment. Renin and aldosterone levels should become normalized if you are giving adequate amount of fludrocortisone. The bone age. What is the importance of bone age? If the bone age is advanced, you know the sex steroids, sex hormones are acting more on the body, more testosterone is working on the body in both sexes, and bone age is advanced, which means the patient is going to lower final adult height. So then you will have to optimize, make sure that the patient is compliant on the drug, optimize the cortisol doses and make sure that they take it to get appropriate final height. Management of stress. As you know, during the stress produces hydrocortisone, but the patients who are having genetic disorders or adrenal gland is destroyed due to some reason, they cannot produce steroids. Febrile illness, surgery and trauma, we will have to double or triple the glucocorticoid dose. 4-hour dose has to be doubled. We have to give IV glucocorticoids when the patient is vomiting and or having diarrhea because the absorption bad. You have to give glucose content during the stress. However, exercise and exams are not as stressors for the adrenal gland. If for all of us, exam is a stress, but not for the adrenal gland. Moving on to Cushing's syndrome. Cushing's is the commonest cause of Cushing's disease, that is the pituitary ACTH dependent Cushing. Is from children over 5 years. So pituitary Cushing's disease is also common in children with children over 5 years. However, in infancy, commonest cause of Cushing's syndrome is adrenal tumor. So if a baby comes to you with features of Cushing's, faltering of height, do an ultrasound scan to find out whether there is an adrenal tumor. Ectopic ACTH secreted proliferating tumors are also there extremely. So ACTH independent Cushing syndrome, which is not pituitary disease, but it's Cushing syndrome, which is ACTH independent, not dependent on ACTH, could be due to primarily adrenal tumors or primary pigmented nodular hyperplasia. I don't think you have to write this. The symptoms of Cushing's, symptoms and signs. Symptoms, weight gain and growth failure are the childhood symptoms. Acne, striae, hirsutism, and virilization if it is adrenal tumor. Lethargy, emotional lability, headache, easy bruising are other features of Cushing. Signs, oxological reduction in height standard deviations is a very specific feature in children. In connection with, together with increased BM. The Cushingioid phase is hypertension, purple striae, they are wide. Hirsutism, again a sign, abnormal pubertal myopathy, osteoporosis due to Cushing's, also cervical fat pad, that is buffalo hump, freckles, which are associated with Carney complex. Height and BMI provide a very sensitive diagnostic discriminator of simple obesity from Cushing's. In simple obesity, both height and go parallel to a centile line. However, in Cushing's, weight gain is associated with faltering of height. Sometimes clinical features can overlap over time. Diagnosis could be delayed by several years from the appearance of the clinical signs to the diagnosis. Investigations wise, urinary free cortisol is very sensitive in children, 88%. Or we can late night salivary cortisol. There should be two measurements. Unfortunately, late night salivary cortisol cannot be done in this country. Urinary free cortisol is available in the private sector, but salivary cortisol is not available. What is available to us is overnight dexamethasone suppression test. What you have patients who are on anti-epileptics, phenytoin and phenobarbitons, or patients who are on rifampicin will have false positive results because the rate of dexamethasone clearance is high in these patients because of these drugs. Because of that, they will not adequately suppress the cortisol level in the morning. When you give dexamethasone at night, morning cortisol has to be less than 30 nanomoles per liter. Then that will exclude Cushing's. A single plasma at midnight, which is less than 1.8 micrograms per deciliter, is the most sensitive single test for Cushing's disease. If it is less than, generally there is a circadian rhythm where the cortisol is less in the midnight and start rising around 4 o'clock in the morning. If the midnight cortisol level is lower than 1.8, that itself excludes Cushing's disease. If you have the ACTH test, ACTH level, if the ACTH is high, we know it is ACTH dependent Cushing. If the ACTH is low, it is ACTH independent Cushing. ACTH independent Cushing is usually in children adrenal tumor. If you do a high dose dexamethasone suppression test, that will help us to differentiate whether it is a pituitary source or not. When the morning cortisol level after 80% reduction is consistent with the pituitary source of Cushing's disease. If it is less than that, it's not pituitary, it is from ectopic tissue. If you do a CRH test and ACTH increases more than 50%, then it is a pituitary cause of Cushing's disease. CRH is also not available. What we have is actually dexamethasone suppression test and ACTH. Inferior petrous sampling for ACTH after CRH stimulation also can be done to find out what the ACTH level is and from which side of the pituitary the ACTH is being produced. It helps us to find out which part of the which side of the gland pituitary gland is affected. Its lateralization is defined as when the intrapetrosa sinus ACTH ratio more than 1.4 CRH stimulation. If it is a pituitary Cushing's, treatment is transsphenoidal surgery, which is a first-line treatment. And if the post-operative serum cortisol level is less than 50 nanomoles per liter, you know that you have cured Cushing's. Pituitary radiotherapy is a second-line treatment, and bilateral adrenalectomy, if you surgically manage the Cushing's, ultimately you will have to remove the adrenal glands in order to prevent the patient having features on symptoms and complications of Cushing's if your brain surgery is not successful. Next, moving on to hyperaldosteronism. That means aldosterone level is high. It is associated with hypertension. When the aldosterone is high, there is salt and water retention. They will have hypertension. They can have hypokalemia, alkalosis, and plasma renin activity will be due to feedback mechanisms. This is the pathway case detection of primary hyperaldosteronism. They will have hypertension, hypokalemia, adrenal, they can have a family history with hypertension. In that case, you will have to do renin and aldosterone ratio. After that, there are confirmatory tests to be done to find out whether it is actually primary hyperaldosteronism. You will have to do imaging test or surgical treatment to find out which side of the adrenal gland is affected. That is adrenal vein sampling. All these things are done only in adults. In children, we don't get to do adrenal vein sampling. Before you do renin aldosterone level, the patient should be normokalemic, and the ratio is plasma aldosterone to renin activity. If it is more than 20, it is diagnostic of adrenal primary hyperaldosteronism. For you to interpret it this way, plasma aldosterone level has to be more than 15 nanograms per deciliter. The next is glucocorticoid remediable hyperaldosteronism. That is because of the ectopic expression aldosterone synthase activity in the cortisol producing zone of there is overproduction of aldosterone and the hybrid steroids 18-hydroxycortisol and 18-oxycortisol. This can only be detected through urinary steroid profile. Here in this condition, because of this ectopic expression of this aldosterone synthase activity, mineralocorticoid production is regulated by ACTH or corticoid. So aldosterone secretion in this condition can glucocorticoids. The next condition is primary glucocorticoid resistant. Here, the patient's excess amount and plasma cortisol concentration is high, but they don't have evidence of Cushing's. They are resistant to cortisol, resistant to glucocorticoid, but more and more cortisol is being in those patients. They can have hypokalemic alkalosis, hypertension due to increased DOC activity, and they can have increased adrenal androgens. The glucocorticoid receptor and the steroid. Again, in this condition, treatment is to block the mineralocorticoid receptor with a mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist or suppression of ACTH using dexamethasone. In these patients, ACTH is high, cortisol is high, but the cortisol is, even though they have high cortisol, the patient is resistant to cortisol. The patient does not have cortisol effects, but the patient will have hypertension due to increased DOX concentration, and also the patient will have virilization. Next is apparent mineralocorticoid excess. Here, the activity of the 11 beta HSD is impaired. If you go through the steroid biosynthetic pathway cartoon, you will understand 11 beta HSD inactivates converting this cortisol can act on the mineralocorticoid receptor and cause hypertension. However, when the beta HSD2 is there, cortisol gets converted to cortisol. Cortisol does not go and act on the mineralocorticoid receptor. If this 11 beta HSD2 is absent, they will have more cortisol than cortisone, and this cortisol goes and act on the mineralocorticoid receptor, resulting in hypokalemic metabolic alkalosis, low renin, low aldosterone, plasma aldosterone, and normal plasma cortisol. If you do the urinary ketosteroids, cortisol to cortisone is increasing. Here, the treatment is mineralocorticoid receptor agonist or suppression of the excretion with a dexamethasone. Familial glucocorticoid, only glucocorticoid is deficient in that condition. It's familial because of low glucocorticoid, the ACTH is produced. ACTH, they have excess pigmentation of the skin, areola, genitalia, and mucus. During the neonatal period, they can have feeding problems, hypoglycemia, which can manifest as in the early childhood. They can present with hypoglycemia, seizures, and shock. They do not have electrolyte ability. It is characterized by low levels of serum dihydroepiandrosterone sulfate. Again, treatment is cortisol. They can have tall stature and advanced bone age. The mechanism of that is not clear. In familial glucocorticoid deficiency, how would you differentiate familial glucocorticoid deficiency from dysplasia? In that case, familial glucocorticoid deficiency do not have ambiguous genitalia. We do not have polygland autoimmune syndrome. There are no other autoimmune destruction. They do not have features of all groups. They do not have features adrenoleukodystrophy over. They do not have adrenache. Absence of adrenache is a feature, typical feature in glucocorticoid deficiency. So these are the negative findings. Sometimes you might have to, when you first come across a patient with Addison disease, sometimes you will have, if you don't have all the investigations to differentiate, you will have to say Addison's disease. You can't commit whether it is familial glucocorticoid deficiency, whether it is adrenoleukodystrophy, because you don't have all the facilities to do the during the monitoring process. You have to look for autoimmune disorders. You have to look for 4A, that is achalasia, alacrimia, autonomic dysfunction. You have to look for neurologic dysfunctions. In adrenoleukodystrophy, the patient might present with hearing defects or visual defects with together Addison features. So then only you will diagnose the complete condition. Some proper diagnosis is retrospective. They might only present with Addison, cortisol deficiency. Your job is to look for conditions associated with Addison disease, and always keep an open mind to revise your ultimate diagnosis depending on the symptoms that you're going to get. Otherwise, you will have to do just studies to find out what exactly is the issue is. Pheochromocytoma, again, adrenal. I discussed that the part called adrenal. It's rare, responsible for 1% of childhood hypertension. Estimated incidence is 0.1. Malignancy is 0.02 per million children. So it's very rare, but pheochromocytoma when a patient hypertension. They have vague symptoms: headache, sweating, flushing, palpitations, tremors, weight loss. 30% can have symptoms of Myers effects. In 63% of the patients, hypertension is the most consistent. In children, most of the time this hypertension is sustained. They might not have paroxysms as opposed to adults. 24-hour total metanephrine's and catecholamines is the investigation of choice. And also you will have to check the fractionated metanephrine's, no metanephrine's and metanephrine's. You have to measure those separately. Plasma free norepinephrine has a very high specificity. What you have to remember is urinary catecholamines can get affected with coffee, tea, banana, chocolate, cocoa, citrus food, and vanilla. So this has to be avoided for several days before you do the 24-hour VMA catecholamine. But the commonly available test is VMA. So if you are going to do that, you will have to make sure that the patient is off these substances for several days. It is pheochromocytoma, germline identified in 59% of patients. The commonest mutation is von Hippel-Lindau, and sometimes it can be associated with neurofibromatosis. And most of these conditions are autosomal dominant. So if you diagnose a patient with pheochromocytoma, it's a good practice that you monitor and screen other family members for hypertension and also other syndromic features. According to the British Society of Pediatric and Endocrinology and Diabetes recommendations, the diagnosis is confirmed by at least 2 24-hour urine samples for metanephrine's and catecholamine. Minimum of 2 negative 24 hours are to rule out pheochromocytoma. VMA and HVA should be undertaken to exclude the diagnosis of suspected neuroblast. If the pheochromocytoma is in doubt, measurement of fractionated metanephrine should be considered. Abdominal ultrasound scan should be done prior to other imaging. MRI and CT, MIBG scans are advised if you can't find a lesion. You should not send these patients for biopsies. Pheochromocytomas, you do not do biopsy because it can aggravate a hypertensive crisis. Medical management, phenoxybenzamine, 12 hourly. And once you adequately suppress alpha receptors, then you can add a beta blocker. Then surgical resection done by experienced surgeon. You can have several tumors, you have to remove all of those. If the bilateral adrenal glands are involved, we will have to do bilateral adrenalectomy. Adrenal tumors, usually less than 5-year-olds coming with Cushing syndrome, unless otherwise it's an adrenal tumor. But the first suspicion is iatrogenic. If it is not iatrogenic, then it has to be an adrenal tumor. They can have virilization, acne, and that can coexist, as I told you, with androgen axis. Sometimes they can have hypertension and they may present rarely with hypertensive crisis or abdominal mass. Clinical screening individual known to be at genetic risk is indicated for adrenal tumors. If the patient is older, if the tumor size is, if there is perioperative tumor spillage, if there is increased DHEAs and glucocorticoids, if there is hypertension, if there is delay in diagnosis, if there is a poor prognosis. It's very difficult to differentiate adrenal carcinoma from. So these are some of the scoring methods to identify whether it is adenoma or carcinoma. Non-secreting adrenal mass neuroblastoma. So you have to do 24-hour catecholamines, abdominal ultrasound, CTO MR before surgical planning. Neuroblastoma also can present with hypertension or abdominal mass. Again, a disorder in adrenal gland. Perioperative antihypertensives for patients with adrenal tumor. Plasma cortisol, electrolytes, and blood glucose has to be corrected. All cases of adrenocortical tumors, we have to send the entire specimen, fresh and unsectioned, to the laboratory pathologist to examine. If the patient has preoperative Cushing syndrome, features of Cushing syndrome, they require intravenous cortisol or hydrocortisone at stress doses, because when you take the tumor out, the contralateral adrenal gland is already suppressed because of the high cortisol production of the tumor itself. So when the tumor is, there's not enough time for the contralateral adrenal gland to wake up and produce cortisol. So those patients during perioperative period need hydrocortisone injections and replacement of hydrocortisone for some time until the contralateral gland wakes up. So depending on the synapse during the follow-up, you will have to continue cortisol treatment. As I told you earlier, we cannot exclude malignancy on histology, and they need endocrine follow-up. In summary, underlying causes of adrenal insufficiency are many. You have to differentiate. It takes time for you to differentiate one from management is same. Cushing's in an infant is adrenal tumor unless proven otherwise. If it is a Cushing syndrome, could be McCune-Albright syndrome. Remember, a patient in a neonate presenting to you with Cushing syndrome, always you have to think of McCune-Albright syndrome. At the moment, I have a baby in ward 2 with Cushing's. Midnight morning cortisol was 400. High testosterone levels, a diagnostic dilemma. We are in the process of investigating this child, but child has Cushing's, child has hypertension, but no virilization. At the virilization in child, there is virilization as well, and testosterone level is high. If you want, you can go and see the patient who is at the moment in ward. If there is virilization, it's a feature of adrenal androgen excess. Hypertension in young children, think of adrenal origin. It is important that you select the appropriate investigation for the diagnosis. Don't throw all the investigation to diagnose patients, because sometimes these investigations happen with the clinical scenarios. Important that you select the appropriate investigations to diagnose what you are dealing with. Thank you.